Have you ever felt a tension pulling at you, as if caught between two worlds? In one world, full of noise, data, endless potential and distraction, and in the other world, your inner self, the true architect of your own thoughts. We truly live in the strangest of times, eh? We've got these magic little boxes that can answer anything under the sun. If you even need an idea, bam, it'll give you one. If you need some guidance, there it is again, right there on your phone. But do you ever feel like maybe, just maybe, it does get a bit too much? Well, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Psychology Pod with me, Samuel Webster Harris, where we throw some science at the world of self-improvement and invite you to build your own philosophy of a life well lived. They say that the internet makes smart people smarter and dumb people dumber. But with the rise of generative AI, ChatGPT, Claude, etc., the digital behemoth is becoming increasingly entwined with our lives and pushing the powers of our own minds further with unlimited help for ideas and creativity. But equally, when we rely on it too much, it can stifle our ability to simply think for ourselves. Ultimately, AI is just another tool like a calculator. Of course, you are stronger using a calculator to do maths than without. And in fact, it allows you to do incredibly hard maths. But if you rely completely on a calculator from the start, you don't build your own ability to intuitively understand numbers, and you won't have a clue when the calculator is telling you some absolute garbage. So whenever you use a tool to do your thinking for you, there is a balance to be struck. However, besides the trend on Twitter or X threads for AI prompts, I think most of us don't actually use AI enough and haven't realized how many of the useful ways we can use it for our own self-improvement and creativity. So today, I'm inviting a good friend, Tim O'Shea, onto the friend who has had incredible success with several different businesses and most recently used AI to teach him to become a writer, and he's grown a newsletter to over 30,000 subscribers, and he runs a course helping many small business owners double their income in 1 year by mostly using AI and good strategy. He has a ton of really genius ideas and life improvements that you can achieve by using AI, whether that's to speed up your workflow and automate tasks, teaching you new skills, or helping you think bigger. He is also highly aware of making sure that you stay in control of using AI and using your own brain. And I genuinely found this conversation hugely useful to me as a curious person who likes to keep up with technology and ideas. We recorded this interview a few months ago now, and I've since used a lot of his tips that we mentioned in the show, and it has genuinely had an impactful improvement on both my workflow and my ideas and methods of learning. So after the interview, I will also share a few personal use cases and ideas for you when it comes to thinking bigger, leveling up, and even using AI for therapy. So it's all coming up after the break, and I hope you stay tuned for a really interesting and fun conversation. Welcome to the show, Tim. Delighted to have you here. The AI hype train has seemed pretty endless over the last few years, but a lot of what is talked about seems a little out of touch from most real people or just use cases in coding. But I know you've been using it for lots of really incredibly useful things, including areas of self-improvement. So I'd love to discuss on the episode today with you some of the best ways that you found to use AI for self-improvement, where the limitations have been, and how to just use AI to make you smarter.
So now we're in this world where with the AIs, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever great things are coming, the teaching is amazing. You can basically take your phone, you can put an equation down, and it will teach you, it will talk you through the equation like a teacher. For teaching, it's just amazing. And using it as a consultant, you could say, act like Warren Buffett. Teach me about investment like Warren Buffett. So when I was learning about investment, I read all his books, yeah? I went to his AGMs for 5 or 6 years until I understood his way of thinking, or what he explained his way of thinking was. And so I think now with the AI, you can fast track loads of that, which is an amazing opportunity, but it's a huge great destruction at the same time. So back when I started, Google had just come out. First time you could access the internet. So you go off trying to do one thing and you go down this rabbit hole and you get lost in it. And before you know it, a day had gone past and you hadn't done what you needed to do. So you've got this overload of information, but actually not getting your work done. And I think with AI, it's exactly the same, but it's probably 10 times worse because the more you get into it, the more it pulls you in because it can do so many things that amazes you. I think now there's an opportunity to have this amazing advisor, consultant, search calculator programmer sat on your phone, sat in your computer. But if it takes over you, then you lose. When actually to really learn, you got to do stuff. You got to put things out there. You got to try things. You got to fail. You got to write. It's all very well getting AI to write your newsletters and so on. But the only way to really get the AI right is by writing it yourself and teaching you what is good and helping you shortcut the bits that are bad. So for me, like being dyslexic, one of my favorite AIs is not even AI, Grammarly. At the end, it tidies it up.
That's interesting. I certainly found like I was using ChatGPT for some of my episode scripts. I used to write everything completely myself. And then I was like completely use AI for everything and was like, I haven't used my brain. As in I just asked it questions and put stuff together and changed it a bit. But then definitely had to just start using my creativity again because I actually was lacking some of the interest that I would normally have. Or something that it didn't make the sort of connections that I would make. But then it is actually really good now that I use it in a more, okay, I can take some step back from it to like use my own thoughts a bit more, but also get to do lots of like curiosity and just ask lots of questions also, and get to have more interesting thoughts than I would just by myself. So it's really handy for this, but I would like to use it for like so many more things. I feel like you can get just a habit of behavior of, okay, I've used it for a few things, so this is what the tool is for, but I don't use it for like the crazy amount of other things I could be using it for. But then, as you said, like you can get addicted to just doing too many things, and maybe this is bad, and it's confusing.
I think the big win for most business people is just the documentation that is necessary, that it doesn't matter if it's not fantastic, it's just got to be done. So it's doing operating procedures, it's doing regulatory documents that have got to be right. And it doesn't matter if the language is a bit AI sounding, because it'll be sent off and the other end will check it. So that I think is very different to the creativity part. And the creativity part can actually just spur your brain off. You can use it for brainstorming and it can show you might get 5 or 6 things you'd have thought of, but it'll take a different connection. So another example, I live in Norfolk and I could ask it, is there a connection between Norfolk and whereabouts are you at the moment?
Portugal, near Porto.
Okay, Portugal, Porto, and is there a connection? And it would find something. And it might not be true. And we could say, can you find a source? And then it might be true. And then you find some weird connection that you can build on. Yeah. You can build it. It can spur your brain into a different way that you didn't know exist. And it's not something you can search out. You could probably try and search it out, but it's very hard to find it. Another way I think is good is things that you've forgotten about in your mind. And when you're speaking to somebody, they come out. Yeah.
There's a lot of trigger points that like actually spark your memories to start working that just don't happen alone.
Yeah. So there's probably something when you were traveling, climbing in Nepal, there's probably something that happened that you have forgotten about forever. But actually the time was quite interesting and probably quite important in its own major or even minor way. And if ChatGPT chatted to you like a human, which it can, and you say to it, okay, I was out in Nepal, I was having this adventure. So if things happen I don't remember, I want you to use some memory techniques to find these things. It would first of all tell you about memory techniques you didn't even know existed. Things like that I found out that you close your eyes and whatever you do, something hum or something, I don't know what it is, but it works. And then your brain clicks into that mode, and then there'll be something, like chatting to me now, it's probably something in your mind that happened somewhere that you think, oh yeah, that happened with that little kid or something, or they came up to you, or that you just forgot about. And I think that's interesting. I don't know, I'm not sure how that helps with productivity and all these sort of things.
When you actually actively use it, it's okay, I'd have to pay someone a lot to sit with me and help me write a book and ask me a bunch of questions for my memory or writing an episode. And I don't have, one, it's inconvenient for me to schedule calls with people at different times of the day because I have to completely plan my day and keep it regimented. And 2, it costs lots of money to get someone to sit with me and train me and do all these different things. I have to source the right person for the right problem that I'm trying to sort for myself. But I can just always go and have a second person that can be an expert at whatever it is that I want help with and actually use it as a helper if I just know of the right prompts to use it. But you don't even necessarily know the right prompts if you can be like, hey, I have this problem. Can you tell me how to use you to help me with this problem? And it can be like, oh, cool. You can tell me to be a memory professional that can ask you these questions and it will then do them.
Yeah, I think you can prompt it to prompt you, or you can just talk to it, I think, like a human. You can just say, this is what I'm working on. How can you best help me? You actually, one of the things that people don't like doing is that they don't like asking for help. It's seen as weakness. especially amongst business owners, because they think they know everything, because they've done so well with not a lot of help normally. And so and the ones that are really good, they ask loads. They're happy to look stupid and they ask.
Some of my friends that think really big, but they'll just ask 3 people to jump on a phone call the next Monday, and they'll just come with a bunch of questions, and you're like, wow, like I was happy to give you some answers. Why didn't I do that? This would totally be fine.
Exactly. And people are happy to help, but actually then to know what question to ask. One of the common things that everyone has, especially if working online, is you just get overloaded with so much input that you just get paralyzed. But you don't even know that's happening. So how do you then ask, how do I get myself unstuck from this overload of information?
Yeah. There's a really good term I heard recently from Cal Newport, who's very good at coming up with 2-word terms that you've never heard of. Solitude deprivation, in terms of we don't spend enough time with our own thoughts, which is, I literally did a TEDx on this exact concept of, if you just listen to a podcast or you have something on TikTok or reading, if you just never in silence just to do the dishwashing or whatever, you don't actually spend time thinking your own thoughts and processing stuff that you need to process. And back when we were hunter-gatherers or whatever, spent hours doing nothing. You didn't have endless, seemingly important information coming at you.
I totally agree. Cal Newport is an amazing writer, and his concepts are similar but changed, yeah. But they're so important. It's great. His latest book, which is Slow Productivity, I think is great, where he explains about things that are really important take time, and you can't rush them. You have to give yourself time to be able to get through it. And this whole push towards productivity, where we're trying to do so much, we could be less productive.
Yeah. It's a concept in terms of a lot of writers say that they wish they'd written their book after they'd done their book tour, because they spend so much time talking to people finally about their ideas. They shape them so much better after doing 6 months worth of like promotions, talking on podcasts with people that are actually good at asking questions, that they'll have a 5 times better book that they could have written if they'd done all that thinking, even though they went through 5 editing processes. But if you were willing to take a few extra years in writing your book and talk to a load more people first, it would probably be a lot better than being like, cool, I'm going to sit by myself, write this book, I'll have an editor that helps a bit for a year and then go. It's actually not as good as going slower. And same with me with my episodes, like trying to do 2 a week or something of writing. They're good, but it's always like a few days afterwards, I'm like, oh, but I could have changed this bit and that bit as well. And if I did half the amount of episodes and just had some more time just like sitting on the same idea, they would all be slightly better. But then it's the balance of the amount of practice I get from doing it also makes me a lot better. You know, Mr. Beast did 3 videos a week and just tried to improve something every single video.
But what works for you might be different than work for him. It might work for you that you do something like that and then you take a break and you put loads of effort into something that you've got very good signals on that it's going to be important, and it just blows everything out of the water.
Yeah, I am feeling a few different concept ideas coming down, and just the general brand concept that I'm doing with the show is migrating a bit. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Anyway, back to other ways that you maybe use GPT.
I think for older age group, my age group, 51, I think that generally they're not as good at using technology. And so they get stumped on simple things which younger people just don't get stumped on. And so a technology to blocker for them, yeah. Blinking from screens, or how to get your computer to do something or your phone to do something. And then if you're not very good at technology, then you troll through Google to try and work it out. And you still can't work it out. But the AI, you can just tell it and it will tell you much quicker. So not every time, but I'd say maybe 70% of the time, it will it'll do the tech support for you in a way that's quite easy to understand. And you can say it, make it simpler. But the barrier there is that if people aren't that tech savvy, or they think they're not, they're scared to even try. But in fact, it's so much easier to fix things now than before. Even programming wise, I'm not a programmer. I can run stuff on my computer. I just copy it. When I get an error message, I put it back into Claude. Then it tells me how to fix it, and then it runs. That's a big unlock for people. You can get your whole technology speed up a whole bunch.
What sort of, so you said like, in terms of coding, what kind of use cases might you be having for coding then?
I, for example, running LLMs on my computer, setting those things up, basic stuff like that. I don't build applications and stuff. So a recent one, the name of the program that runs on your computer and it makes animations for you. So you have to install the program, then you can use Claude to write the code for the animations. But then it breaks. So you go backwards and forwards and you bring the error message forwards and you get what you want. But at the same time, what I have found is it teaches you, by doing it, it teaches you because you start to understand what things mean when you didn't know before. So with programming, I am not a programming teacher, but unless you do it, you're never going to learn it. And same with writing, actually. With writing, I tried to write for years and wrote and gave up and wrote and gave up. But with a system and using AI, you can get your ideas out, you can document things easier, you can go back to your library and find stuff you've talked about, written about, be interviewed about, whatever, and you can record things out much easier, you can format it easier, you can get it checked. It takes you through the process. So now actually, I don't use that much AI to write now. I just tend to write, but it's taught me better than I was. A year ago, I used it a lot, but now my skills have gone up. It's actually quicker for me not to use it. I've learned, it's taught me things about structures, looked at other people's stuff, and I said, analyze this structure. And it will say they always do this, and you can't see it. But when you then see it, they point it out to you. Same with like sales copy and ad copy, sales letters. If you say, here's a load, analyze them, what are the sections? There's this section, there's the social proof, here's the introduction, here's the avatar, and it's, oh, that's the structure. Now I know how to write a sales letter, and you can read up about it, but it's a more interactive way of learning by doing. So
Yeah, definitely. As in, I've certainly found for learning programming, there's endless tutorials on YouTube where you just copy paste exactly what someone's doing, but you don't learn half as much as you do just trying to do something, but having someone fix it as you're going along because you're actually trying. And I've also found there's just so much that you don't really realize about the world when you start looking into it. There's a sort of music production, and you just think about music differently, or video production, or just sales copy that you just don't notice going on until you ask a few more questions and dig deeper. But it's cool that you can use AI that helpfully to just help you analyze anything.
Okay, we're coming up for an ad break to help keep the show alive, after which we'll be going into the topic of using AI to help you tell stories and in covering a lot of your own personal stories. Now, this is a topic that might be more important than you think. There's a great quote that says, "Great stories happen to people who tell great stories," meaning that it's not about what happens to you and what you've done so much as it is about the artistry and the ability to interpret it and make it interesting. So, for example, one person might say that they were anxious about picking up the phone. Sure, maybe you can relate to that. Maybe you can relate to that statement, but it's not an interesting story. Another person, however, might say they had an overwhelming feeling their stomach was going to burst out of their eyeballs anytime the phone rang, and due to some mysterious and currently undocumented phenomena of the universe, this feeling would arise the second before the phone even started ringing. Of all the strange and wonderful gifts one might wish for when given an ability to predict the future, such as perhaps knowing what the winning lottery numbers would be or not tripping over cracks in the pavement, which is definitely the second thing I would wish for after the winning lottery numbers. But no, I have been given neither of those. Instead, I have been blessed with the incredible ability to crap myself before the phone has even started ringing. Wonderful. So yes, the point I was making there was those were two statements about the exact same person, me, and they were talking about the exact same event, but one is an interesting story about what happened to me and helps you relate to my feelings and frustrations, and the other one is just a sentence about a problem. As I've hopefully demonstrated, stories are useful and important, and it would be worth your while to stay tuned on how to use AI to help you identify and tell your own stories. And after that, I'll talk personally about some of my own use cases for AI that haven't come up in the conversation and personal tips to help you be more yourself. Anyway, on to the adverts, which you are, of course, free to skip.
She said you had fed lots of stuff around your own stories into AI. How do you build up like a bank of content that it knows? Because it doesn't usually remember that much stuff I tell it. Like I can talk to it and just in that conversation it'll remember things, but it'll already start to forget half of what I'm referring to.
The memory feature within ChatGPT. So what I do, there's lots of things it needs to remember. Yeah. And the most basic ones are, come back to the personal stories in a minute. For your use case, you know your avatar, you know who your audience is, yeah? And that's probably quite a long paragraph to really describe it correctly. And describing your podcast would be also quite a long paragraph. So you have those saved, And I use a thing called Text Expander that sits on my PC. And then you get keyboard shortcuts, / whatever your shortcut will be. So for example, if I do / context, it brings up the context of my business, / audience, or for me, odd, brings up my context of my audience. So there's things that you're repeatedly putting in. You just build, it's not necessarily the library of prompts, but it's the library of what you're going to put into the prompt. And so that helps. But to answer your question about getting it to remember stuff, you can build these GPT things where you can put in a database, and it works. Sometimes it doesn't work because it doesn't see the file for whatever reason. And sometimes it's because the model's updated or something's happened in the background. And all you have to do is change how you reference the file. It starts working again. I think it's useful. So for example, I've got a whole bunch of personal stories. And what I would do is put it in and say, can you find a personal story that links into this thing I'm writing? And it will come up with some ideas for me. And I've done that so much now, I don't do it anymore because I'll find a story in my mind or I'll look at my notes and I'll just do it naturally now. It's taught me how to do it.
Yeah, I've been doing that quite well. But then I did find, I started doing like a bit of a database of personal stories. It's just like, I had no idea how many I had until I had a bunch of different ways to think about it. So I went for, okay, one chronological list of the different things. Then one was like, okay, what are the school-based stories? What are embarrassing-based stories? What are the birthday-based stories? And then just was like, wow, I have crazy amounts of stories of different things. I don't even know what they might be used for, but then when something comes up, it can come out. And I had an episode on social pressure personality disorder a few days ago, and I started it with a story about a time I had like a birthday wish when I was 6, and my sister made me wish for a pony for her. And it was just, I ended up telling this stupid story of all the cool things I was interested in, and then the fact that I actually wished for a pony for my sister because of social pressure, even though no one would have even known. And it was like, yeah, it's just a cool story to start with for an episode on social pressure personality disorder. But at the time, I had no idea why I would use that story. But I was like, yeah, this is a stupid story from my childhood that's like just a story. So yeah, it's worth having them all. But yeah, it's really, the connection isn't there until it finally is made.
I think the first stage is you have to start documenting them. And when you see one, write it down wherever you can find it again. The writing courses that I did, you have to create second brain or whatever you want to call it, your own database of ideas. That when you need to, you tap into it, you pull it out, and you know it's there and you can find it. When you're starting to write, you don't have that database and it feels not productive to spend time working on it. But as you're doing things, if you just make notes as you go, it starts getting bigger and becomes easier and easier. Yeah? You can tap into it. Like you just tapped into that one about making a wish for your sister.
Yeah, nice. I think one of the issues I've had with that is just, it is a lot of time to fill in those stories well, as in, it was easy for me to spend an hour just writing like the title of what that story might be, but to actually then write the story properly or not was like, okay, where's my week to do all of that? But I'm not sure if I actually need to bother doing that versus just enough of a prompt for it. Intrigued.
Depends on the purpose of the story.
Because, yeah, that's the other thing is I do find I'll write titles for lots of ideas for an episode or things like this, personal stories, but then the writing of it, it ends up having another whole set of new ideas that you wouldn't even expect. Like, you don't write because you know the answer, you write to find the answer. And a lot of those things get 10 times better once you actually go into it. So I do feel like if I did have the time to write all these personal stories, there'd be a bunch of other layers that I wouldn't even know about until I'd done it.
Yeah. So one way documenting your personal stories with AI is when you're going for a walk, just talk to your phone, just talk to them all rather than sit down and write them. That's what I did. I just walked around the block with my dog and talked to my phone. I used Otter because it doesn't lose your audio if it loses the signal. So you can just chat away to it. And if you're walking around and I live in the country, but in the city, people think you're a bit of a nut job if you're chatting to your phone. I don't really care if people think about it, but at the same time, I don't, but I do, in that my brain doesn't want to work. So if I think I'm on a phone call, I don't feel quite so stupid talking to a machine. Maybe that's because I'm a bit older.
It does look a bit like you're using FaceTime or something at this point. So bad.
No one cares.
I certainly haven't really got over the concept of being a YouTuber where you just stand in front of people and take selfies or they like actually record yourself. And I'm like, oh God, I could be doing that. But yeah, that is an interesting one. So did you, when you said that you used Otter, did you just prompt yourself of being like, cool, I'm walking for an hour, I'm just randomly telling different stories as they come up? Or did you tell it like, hey, here are 5 stories, ask me about them and ask me different things and I'll tell you about them as you ask me?
So you can do what you described there. You can do that with ChatGPT audio, where you hit the audio button and it will but then the connection and you lose what you said. If you do it in small sections, it works. So what I've done that works quite well, if I haven't got any ideas, then I'll ask ChatGPT to start that. And if I've got something that's in my mind, I'll turn it off and then turn Ultra on, and they'll just chat. Yeah, I'll just talk away. And yeah, that's the way I tend to do it. The harder thing, actually, which I haven't cracked, is that when you're walking, in your mind, you've got this dialogue going on. And if you could capture that's better than what you'd be speaking, what you'd be saying. I've not worked out how to capture that.
Wait, this is why I think I actually got interested in writing, because like I was really good as a child at physics and having loads of ideas, and I didn't ever have to study for exams. I didn't really listen to the teacher because I was too much ADHD. I just worked stuff out because I found it fascinating. Like I got to an exam and worked out how to do the answers because I couldn't really remember equations and stuff. And I just had lots of answers that I could just come up with myself, and like, I just love processing things, but I just was terrible at communicating. And I was like, I can't get anywhere in life or have my ideas adopted if I can't communicate them. So I was like, okay, I'm so bad at communicating, I need to learn how to communicate, because there's just all this cool stuff going on in my head that nobody knows about. Yeah, like obviously there's still levels of breakthroughs that happen in your mind that you just don't know how to communicate to someone. This is why communication is so important. It's just why people have arguments, because you're being a nice person to someone, they're trying to be nice, but you just don't understand each other. And you think you're both dicks, but you're not. And there's so much stuff that goes on in your head that is assumed and people don't know about. And yeah, it's really hard to get that out. But yeah, a constant stream of thought and speaking isn't natural for me. I wonder what it's like for an extrovert versus an introvert in terms of some people actually think out loud.
I think perhaps it's easier. If you're walking, like talking to me now, maybe what's in your head is coming out easier than if you were just talking one way.
Yeah. I don't know. Because as I said before, is when people have so much stuff in their head that they're thinking about themselves, which is ego compared to what's actually coming out of their mouth. And you just have a lot of expectations, and just all of your knowledge is behind the things that you say of how it's going to get interpreted. But I do think that extroverts do think out loud more, even though they don't know the assumptions that's going on. But compared to the amount of stuff that I'll think about before I say something, used to be crippling. Now it's a bit like I'm operational, but still far from that. But I think it's really good practice though, to talk to an AI like you've outlined, because I'm like, yeah, that just makes so much more sense to actually go and do that.
Yeah, there's the AIs that talk back to you and the AIs that just take your thoughts. And interesting when you've seen these headsets that can translate your thoughts into moving stuff and that sort of thing. And they can translate your thoughts into words. It's all coming. I'm not really scared of AI, but it does worry me a bit that if you go through a scanner, someone can actually see what you're thinking.
Yeah, that's crazy. The research that Facebook's been publishing on just EEG recording, and they can basically use a large language model to then take that picture of your brain scan, which is just some electrical signals, and turn that into text and or an image of what you were looking at or thinking. And you're like, that's so cool. So scary. But it's going to be so fascinating when they use that for analyzing dreams and other stuff, or just experiences with one person versus someone else that experience the same thing and how different it can be based on trauma or ADHD, as in what's going on in that person's brain compared to this person's brain in the same experience. It's going to be crazy. But yeah, I don't know how much of this is useful versus weird obsession noise. Just like you're saying, like you can get addicted to using ChatGPT for the wrong stuff.
I think just doing things for fun is useful.
Yes, it is. And that is a genius insight, I think, to end the interview on for now. So thanks a lot, Tim, for coming on the show and sharing all the ways that he has been mucking about with AI in ways that I had never imagined. And his insights have genuinely sparked lots of ideas I have been putting into practice. Firstly, I'll round up on the conversation where we touched on how to capture our thought processes. This is really tricky. I often feel like time in the present moment moves too fast. Moments can contain layers upon layers that we'll only grasp years later. For example, my favorite podcast, Dissect, unpack a 3-minute long song over 40 whole minutes to actually explain what the hell is going on in each second. And every thought we have is like a path down a labyrinth in our mind with layers that only time can reveal and is nearly impossible to fully capture in a few words. But I have personally seen a huge improvement in my ability to express myself by journaling with AI. Now, like Tim, I do walk around in the morning speaking to my phone a bit like a lunatic, apparently. But it certainly beats sitting at my desk using up my attention span, which is already in short supply. Instead, walking about feels refreshing, it doesn't feel like work, and you can look around at nature whilst expressing your thoughts instead of staring at pixels. And I find that this practice isn't just about journaling, which we're always told to do and I can struggle with. It's also about gaining fluency in real-time thought expression, which has never been a personal strength of mine. Another useful method for working with AI is I found it wildly impressive at helping me think bigger or think differently about a topic or a challenge, and asking it for life advice or writing advice in the style of your favorite author like Morgan Housel or Mark Manson or Esther Perel is really, really satisfying and cool. But you can go even bigger than that. My favorite thing lately is I really enjoy having a chat with Morpheus from The Matrix. And yes, I definitely sound like a lunatic at this point, but Morpheus has such a transcendent way of explaining things, and it really hits a spot for me. And if he can guide the one, well, he can bloody well guide me on life's great riddles. Why not? And finally, another really good area when it comes to self-improvement is, of course, counseling and therapy. And I sound like an advert at this point, but AI actually does a good job of replicating CBT or psychotherapy styles. And it genuinely isn't a bad idea to go for it for advice on relationships, emotions, doubts, productivity. And yes, it's not the same as talking to a real human, but it is available whenever you need it. It doesn't cost $100 an hour, and you can get much faster feedback on your thoughts than waiting until next week. And it's genuinely full of good ways to get out of your head and help build empathy or understanding for your situation or other people's situations. So yes, lots of cool things you can do with AI when you play around with it. And in fact, lately I have been using it for some coding projects on the weekends, which have been blowing my mind, as well as data analysis and even language learning, all of which are very impressive, but I'm not going to go into details because that would feel like I'm getting slightly off scope for the show topic. But biggest lessons from this whole episode is that just try experimenting with it and have fun. Why not? You could try asking it to write you an email in the style of Yoda, because you can. And whatever you're doing, if you don't get the results you first hoped for, don't give up. Just play around with different ideas and see what happens. Of course, remember not to use AI for everything and turn your brain off and lose your own voice. Definitely make sure you're using it to help you find your voice and apply critical thinking. Think of it like a fast but slightly flawed intern. It's there to add to your ideas and not replace them. The goal, of course, is to be a better and deeper thinker, not to be a lazy and irrational one. So on that, we truly live in remarkable times. If you do have a friend who should really talk to an AI therapist before they open their mouth, well, do them a favor, shoot them this episode, as it is how the show grows. The conversation I recorded with Tim was actually an hour and a half long, and we spoke a lot about mental models. And after the conversation on AI, we spoke a lot about all of our favorite different mental models for life and understanding how to define success for ourselves and achieve it. It was very wide-ranging as a conversation and all over the place as far as interviews go for the show. But if you are intrigued, it will be available on the premium feed for premium subscribers, and you can find out more in the show description if you are interested. Then you may have heard me talk about the fact I have an open calendar on Wednesday afternoons for chatting with any of my listeners. And I have been enjoying this so much. This week I spoke with Ethan and Ola, who were both total legends, and I actually feel a bit bad that I haven't shouted out all the people I've spoken to this year who genuinely been a very interesting and inspiring bunch and really helped me with the show. So if you have felt interested to talk to me and haven't booked a call yet, the link is in the description, and it genuinely does help me understand who the hell does listen to my show and why and what I can do for them. And you're actually doing me a favor. I regularly talk about the importance of awareness as a human. And for me as a creator, very hard to truly practice growth mindset without regular feedback. So it's a gift for me to get to know who the hell all you lovely people are around the world that listen to me. In fact, in the last few weeks, I've had calls with people from Okinawa, Japan, Nova Scotia, Canada, and even Zanzibar, which is totally blowing my brains. But whether you're from Detroit or Newcastle or Honolulu, you are, of course, welcome to talk to me. And I think I've made the point now. I hope this episode has given you a few ideas to go forth and dance your own tune in the endless symphony of information that swirls around our fingertips. and remind you to not forget to step back and marvel at it all every now and then. After all, the Stone Age was only a few thousand years ago, and yet here we are now, able to turn sand into these crazy little devices that we can hold in our hand and use it to summon a car any time of the day. We can play infinite cat videos, or we can even rewrite our podcast episode outros in the style of Morpheus from The Matrix. And on that, here are my final words for you in the style of Morpheus. Remember, the true power of any tool lies not in its capacity to transform the world around you, but in its ability to reveal who you truly are. AI can guide you, inspire you, or even challenge you, but only you can decide what path to take and what wisdom to create. So, choose wisely, for in the end, it is not the machine, but the mind that shapes reality. Thank you so much for listening. Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary. But when we learn things, it's important to reflect. So I politely invite you to take a pause, rifle through the biggest ideas you just heard. So here's your opportunity to hit pause and have a think. Okay, did you wrestle with some insights? Information doesn't stick when we race from one podcast to the next without using our brain to play with the knowledge. So here's another go at a pause. Alrighty, I'll let you off to continue with your life now. If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you. And other than that, please stay curious.
Curious. Spine, the nose.